March 24, 1944. 22,000 feet above Berlin, Germany. The night sky is a hell of searchlights, flak explosions, and burning aircraft. Flight Lieutenant James Jimmy Harrington, 24 years old, from Manchester, pilots his de Havilland Mosquito fighter bomber through the chaos, watching 12 Lancaster heavy bombers struggle toward their target through a gauntlet of German defenses. The Lancasters are loaded with incendiaries, 8,000 pounds each, designed to turn Berlin into an inferno, but they're also slow, vulnerable, and being hunted by something far more dangerous than flak. The Messerschmitt Bf-110 night fighters equipped with radar and upward-firing cannon. Harrington's mission is simple in theory, impossible in practice. Protect the bombers from night fighters using a single two-man Mosquito against what intelligence suggests are at least 6 German interceptors in the area. He's already shot down one Bf-110. His fuel is running low. His navigator, Flying Officer Peter Walsh, is calculating they have maybe 15 minutes before they must turn back or risk not making it home. And then Harrington sees something that makes his blood freeze. A formation of 4 Bf-110s climbing toward the bombers from below, positioning for the deadliest attack possible. He has 30 seconds to make a decision that will either save 12 crews or kill his own. The strategic bombing campaign over Germany in 1944 is a war of attrition measured in burning aluminum and dead airmen. RAF Bomber Command sends hundreds of heavy bombers, Lancasters, Halifaxes, Sterlings, to destroy German industrial capacity, transportation networks, and civilian morale. The theory is simple: destroy Germany's ability to make war, and the war ends faster. The reality is horrific. Bomber crews have a life expectancy measured in missions, not months. Of every 100 men who join Bomber Command, 45 will die in combat, 6 will be seriously injured, 3 will be captured, and only 46 will survive their tour of 30 operations. The Germans call it Nachtjagd, night hunting. They've created the most sophisticated air defense system in the world, radar networks that detect incoming bombers hundreds of miles away, searchlight batteries that illuminate them, flak guns that fill the sky with shrapnel, and night fighters, specialized aircraft with radar, powerful cannon, and crews trained to kill bombers in darkness. The Messerschmitt Bf-110, once considered obsolete as a day fighter, has become the terror of night skies. Equipped with Liechtenstein radar in the nose and Schräge Musik, upward-firing cannon mounted at an angle, it can approach bombers from below, invisible to the bombers' gunners, and fire directly into the fuel tanks and bomb bay. It's devastatingly effective. In a single pass, a skilled Bf-110 pilot can destroy a Lancaster before the crew even knows they're under attack. The RAF's counter is the Mosquito, the wooden wonder, built mostly of plywood and balsa, fast enough to outrun most German fighters, maneuverable enough to dogfight, and versatile enough to serve as bomber, fighter, or reconnaissance aircraft. Mosquitoes patrol the bomber streams, hunting the hunters. Flight Lieutenant James Harrington has been flying Mosquitoes for 11 months. He's completed 27 missions. 3 more and he'll complete his tour, be rotated to a training command, probably survive the war. But tonight, his 28th mission, he's leading what's called a Ranger Patrol over Berlin. His job: find German night fighters and destroy them before they can attack the bomber stream. He's already found one Bf-110, stalked it through the darkness, and shot it down with a 3-second burst from his 420mm cannon. The German fighter exploded in a ball of orange fire, spiraling into the blackness below. But now, with fuel running low and the bomber stream approaching Berlin's most heavily defended zones, Harrington sees 4 more night fighters climbing into position, and they're perfectly positioned for a massacre. Inside the cramped cockpit of the Mosquito, Harrington and his navigator Peter Walsh exist in a world of green instrument lights, radio static, and calculated violence. Walsh sits behind Harrington, surrounded by radar screens, navigation charts, and radio equipment. He's Harrington's eyes in darkness, interpreting the ghostly blips on the radar that represent other aircraft. 4 contacts, range 2 miles, Angels 20, climbing toward the bomber stream, Walsh says, his voice calm despite the adrenaline. They're in perfect position for a Schräge Musik attack. Harrington knows what that means. The Bf-110s will climb to just below the Lancasters, match their speed, aim their upward-firing cannon at the bombers' bellies, where the fuel tanks are located, and fire. The Lancaster crews won't see them coming. The first indication of attack will be their own aircraft exploding. Standard doctrine says Harrington should attack the night fighters immediately. Dive on them. Use the Mosquito's speed advantage. scatter them before they can engage the bombers. But Harrington sees a problem. The 4 Bf-110s are flying in tight formation, a swarm in German tactical doctrine. They're not hunting independently. They're coordinated, probably receiving ground control guidance from radar stations below, working as a team. If Harrington attacks one, the others will know immediately. They'll break formation, scatter, and while he's chasing one, the others will attack the bombers. He can probably shoot down one, maybe two night fighters, but the other 2 or 3 will kill at least 4 Lancasters, 42 men, before Harrington can engage them. It's brutal mathematics. Save some by sacrificing others. "What are you thinking?" asks Walsh, who knows Harrington well enough to recognize when his pilot is calculating something unusual. "I'm thinking standard doctrine gets people killed," Harrington says slowly. "We can't kill them all fast enough, but maybe we don't need to kill them. Maybe we just need to make them unable to attack." "How?" Harrington looks at his fuel gauge. 15 minutes to bingo fuel, the point where they must turn back or risk running out over enemy territory. 15 minutes to save 12 bombers carrying 84 men. "I'm going to do something that's either brilliant or gets us court-martialed," Harrington says. "Possibly both. Those are my favorite kind of ideas." Walsh responds dryly. "What do you need from me?" "Radio silence from here on and hold on to something. This is going to get violent." Harrington pushes the throttle forward, diving the Mosquito toward the 4 German night fighters. Harrington's plan is insane. It violates every doctrine taught at RAF Fighter Command. But it's born from something doctrine can't teach: intuitive understanding of aircraft performance under extreme conditions. The Mosquito is faster than the Bf-110, about 40 mph faster at this altitude. It's also more maneuverable. But 4 Bf-110s, working together, have overwhelming firepower advantage. Each mounts 4 20mm cannon and 4 machine guns. If they catch the Mosquito in a crossfire, it will be shredded in seconds. But Harrington isn't planning to fight them. He's planning to disrupt them. He dives the Mosquito to 500 feet below the bomber stream, positioning himself directly underneath the Lancasters. Then he does something that makes Walsh's stomach drop. He switches on the Mosquito's navigation lights, the small lights on the wingtips and tail that aircraft use to avoid collisions in formation flying. In a combat zone, with the sky full of enemy fighters, turning on navigation lights is suicidal. It makes you visible for miles, which is exactly what Harrington wants. "Jimmy, what the hell are you—" Walsh starts. "Trust me," Harrington interrupts. "Watch the German fighters. The 4 Bf-110s, climbing toward the bombers from 2,000 feet below, see the navigation lights. Their formation immediately shifts. They're confused. German bombers, Heinkel He 111s, Dornier Du 217s, sometimes accompany night fighters to illuminate targets with flares. But this aircraft is too small, too fast, in the wrong position." The lead Bf-110 pilot, Hauptmann Ernst Hoffmann, a veteran with 19 bomber kills, hesitates. His orders are clear: attack the British bombers. But this aircraft with navigation lights on, is it damaged? A decoy? A trap? German night fighter crews have learned to be cautious. The RAF has started using intruder missions, Mosquitoes that lurk near German airfields, attacking fighters as they take off or land. Hoffmann has lost 3 squadron mates to these tactics. He makes a decision: investigate the unknown aircraft first, then proceed to attack bombers. All aircraft break and engage the contact with navigation lights. He radios to his formation. It may be a pathfinder marking targets. The 4 Bf-110s break formation, abandoning their perfect attack position on the Lancasters, and turn toward Harrington's illuminated Mosquito. In the Mosquito, Walsh watches the radar. They're taking the bait. All 4 changing course toward us. "Good," says Harrington, his hand on the throttle. Now comes the hard part. Hold tight. He switches off the navigation lights and dives the Mosquito into the darkness below. The psychology of night combat is entirely about perception and disorientation. In darkness, without visual references, pilots rely on instruments, radar, and split-second decision-making. Confuse any of these, and you confuse the pilot. Harrington has just confused 4 German pilots spectacularly. One moment they were tracking a brightly lit aircraft. The next moment it's gone, vanished into darkness as if it never existed. Their radar operators frantically sweep their Liechtenstein radar displays, looking for the contact. But Harrington has dived 3,000 feet in 15 seconds, putting him below the effective range of the German radar, which struggles to track targets at very low altitudes due to ground clutter interference. Where is it? Hoffman demands over the radio. Anyone have contact? Negative, responds another pilot. Lost him when he went dark. Could be heading back to England, suggests a third. Hoffman knows he's made a tactical error. He broke formation, abandoned the bomber attack for what might have been a decoy, but he can't take the risk of ignoring what might be a Pathfinder aircraft marking targets for a larger raid. Reform and resume search pattern, he orders, but keep scanning for that mystery aircraft. The 4 BF-110s begin to reform, but they're now 2,000 feet lower than before. Their attack position on the bombers completely lost. The Lancasters, unmolested, continue toward Berlin. In the Mosquito, Harrington has pulled out of the dive at 18,000 feet. Walsh is checking the instruments with shaking hands. We lost 4,000 feet in 20 seconds, Walsh says. You know the airframe stress limits. I know, Harrington interrupts. We're fine. The Mosquito can take it. What are the Germans doing? Walsh checks his radar. They're reforming at Angels 18. They've lost their attack position on the bomber stream. Harrington allows himself a small smile. Phase 1 worked. He disrupted the attack. But the bombers aren't safe yet. The Germans will realize what happened and try to regain altitude, reposition for another attack. How long until they can threaten the bombers again? Harrington asks. Walsh calculates quickly. 4 minutes to climb back to 22,000 feet. Maybe 5 if they're being cautious. And how long until the Lancasters are through the worst of the flak zone? 7 minutes. There's the problem. The Germans will be back in position before the bombers are safe. Harrington bought time, but not enough. Then we do it again, Harrington says. Different variation. They'll be looking for the navigation light trick now, so we need something else. We're down to 12 minutes of fuel, Walsh warns. Then we better make them count. Harrington climbs back toward the bomber stream, planning his next disruption. The art of aerial deception requires understanding your enemy's mindset. Harrington knows that German night fighter pilots are professionals, trained in specific tactics, operating under strict ground control guidance. They follow procedures because procedures keep them alive, which means they're predictable. Harrington climbs back to 21,000 feet, positioning himself between the reforming German fighters and the bomber stream. This time, instead of making himself visible, he does the opposite. He turns off all aircraft systems that emit radio signals, the IFF transponder, the radio altimeter, anything that might show up on German radar. Then he flies straight toward the German formation at maximum speed. Jimmy, this is insane, Walsh says. If we collide, we won't collide. They have radar. We don't. They'll see us coming and brake. And if they don't, then we have a very short but interesting final few seconds. It's a game of chicken played at 300 miles per hour in darkness with stakes measured in human lives. Harrington is betting that Hoffman and his pilots, seeing an unknown aircraft heading directly toward them at high speed, will assume it's either attacking or doesn't see them, and will break formation to avoid collision. In the lead BF-110, Hoffman's radar operator suddenly calls out, "Contact! Range 1 kilometer, closing fast, directly ahead." Hoffman sees it on his own radar display, an aircraft moving at high speed, aimed directly at his formation. No radio contact, no identification, just a radar blip growing larger by the second. It could be another German fighter, not seeing them. It could be a British intruder, deliberately attacking. Either way, Hoffman has about 10 seconds to decide. All aircraft break formation, he orders. Scatter and reform at Angels 23. The 4 BF-110s break in different directions, each pilot banking hard to avoid the approaching contact. Harrington sees them scatter on Walsh's radar. They broke, Walsh announces with something like awe in his voice. All 4 dispersed. Harrington banks the Mosquito hard right, avoiding where the German fighters were, and continues toward the bomber stream. The German fighters are now scattered across 5 square miles of sky, each trying to relocate the others while also searching for the mysterious contact that nearly killed them. It will take them at least 6 minutes to reform and regain attack position. The Lancasters now have 13 minutes of relative safety instead of 7. Fuel status? Harrington asks. 9 minutes to bingo, Walsh responds. We need to turn back now if we want any safety margin. 1 more pass, Harrington says. 1 more disruption and the bombers will be through the worst. And if we run out of fuel over Germany? Harrington doesn't answer. They both know what happens then. But the Germans are learning. Hauptmann Hoffmann is a veteran, not a fool. After the second disruption, he understands what's happening. There's a single British aircraft, probably a Mosquito, deliberately interfering with his attacks on the bomber stream, not trying to shoot them down, just disrupting, confusing, buying time. It's clever. Hoffman respects clever, but respect doesn't mean surrender. All aircraft, he radios to his scattered formation. We're being harassed by a single intruder. New tactics. 2 aircraft continue to bomber stream. 2 aircraft hunt the intruder. Split focus. It's the correct tactical response. If the British pilot tries to disrupt the bomber attack, the hunting pair will engage him. If he goes after the hunting pair, the other 2 will attack the bombers. Either way, the British pilot must choose. Save himself or save the bombers, he can't do both. In the Mosquito, Walsh sees the German formation split on radar. They've adapted. 2 contacts climbing toward bombers, 2 contacts circling. They're looking for us. Harrington sees the trap immediately. He can attack the 2 fighters going after the bombers, but the other 2 will catch him from behind. Or he can evade the hunters, but the bombers will be slaughtered. Fuel? He asks, though he already knows it's critical. 7 minutes, Walsh says quietly. We're past bingo. Even if we turn back right now, we'll be running on fumes over the English Channel. Harrington looks at the fuel gauge. Walsh is right. They've stayed too long, burned too much fuel in the high-speed maneuvers and climbs. Even turning back immediately doesn't guarantee they'll make it home. But 12 Lancasters, 84 men, are about to be attacked by 2 Bf-110s with perfect positioning. Can we reach the bombers before the Germans engage? Harrington asks. Walsh calculates quickly. Maybe. If we go to full throttle, we can intercept in 90 seconds, but that burns fuel even faster. We'd have maybe 4 minutes of flying time left after engagement. 4 minutes to cross 100 miles of enemy territory and the English Channel. Yes, it's impossible. The mathematics don't work. They'll run out of fuel somewhere over Belgium or the North Sea. Best case, they crash land or bail out over enemy territory. Worst case, they go into the Channel and drown before rescue arrives. Harrington thinks of the 84 men in those Lancasters, thinks of their families, thinks of himself at 24 with his whole life ahead. Then, he pushes the throttle to maximum. We're going in, he says simply. 1 more pass, then we worry about getting home. Walsh doesn't argue. He just grips his seat and says, "Make it count, Jimmy." The Mosquito leaps forward as Harrington pushes the Rolls-Royce Merlin engines to war emergency power, a setting that burns fuel at an unsustainable rate, but provides maximum speed. The aircraft accelerates to 380 km/h, eating the distance between them and the approaching German fighters. But Harrington isn't planning to shoot them down. He doesn't have time for a prolonged dogfight. He needs something faster, more decisive. Range to German fighters? He asks Walsh. 2,000 meters in closing. They're in firing position on the lead Lancaster in 30 seconds. Harrington sees the German fighters on his windscreen now. 2 dark shapes against the slightly lighter sky, silhouetted by the distant glow of Berlin's burning districts. They're focused on the bombers above them, lining up for the perfect Schrager music attack. They don't see Harrington coming from behind. 1,500 meters, Walsh counts down. 1,000, they're starting their attack run. Harrington arms his cannon, 4 20mm Hispano cannon, 150 rounds each, enough for perhaps 10 seconds of sustained fire. In a typical engagement, he'd wait until 400 meters, close range, for maximum effectiveness. But Harrington doesn't plan a typical engagement. At 800 meters, beyond effective range, he opens fire. The 4 cannon roar, sending tracers streaking through the night sky. Most of the shells miss the German fighters, falling away into darkness. But that's not the point. The point is that the 2 Bf-110 pilots see tracers passing by their cockpits. They see death approaching at 3,000 feet per second, and they react instinctively. Both night fighters break off their attack run, diving and banking away from the bomber stream, abandoning their perfect firing position. Harrington doesn't pursue. Instead, he pulls up hard, climbing toward the bomber stream itself, and does something that will later be called either genius or insanity. He flies directly into the bomber formation. "Jimmy, what are you?" Walsh starts, but the maneuver speaks for itself. The 12 Lancasters are flying in a loose stream, each aircraft maintaining separation of a few hundred feet. Harrington threads the Mosquito between them, weaving through the formation like a needle through cloth. The German fighters, repositioning to resume their attack, see this and hesitate. Their radar shows the bomber formation, but now there's another contact, a British fighter, moving erratically within the formation itself. Hoffman, in one of the Bf-110s, sees the problem immediately. If he fires at the bombers, he risks hitting the British fighter, which might be exactly what the pilot wants, to bait the Germans into friendly fire incidents. Or worse, the British pilot might be setting a trap, using the bombers as cover while positioning to attack. Hold fire, Hoffman orders. Wait for clear separation. But separation isn't coming. The bomber crews can see the Mosquito now, its sleek shape darting between the massive Lancasters like a predator fish among whales. It's unorthodox, dangerous, potentially suicidal. Colliding with a Lancaster at 200 MMRP means both aircraft would be destroyed instantly, but it's also brilliant. The Lancasters can't fire at the Mosquito. It's friendly. The German fighters can't fire at the Mosquito without risking hitting the Lancasters, which would alert every bomber gunner in the formation. And as long as Harrington stays within the bomber stream, he's using the Lancasters as both cover and deterrent. Fuel? Harrington asks, already knowing the answer will be bad. 3 minutes, Walsh says. Maybe less. The engines are running hot from war emergency power. 3 minutes of fuel. They're at 22,000 feet above Berlin, the most heavily defended city in Germany, with at least 4 German night fighters in the area and home base 450 miles away, across enemy territory and the English Channel. In any rational analysis, Flight Lieutenant James Harrington and Flying Officer Peter Walsh are already dead. They just haven't stopped moving yet. How long until the bombers complete their run? Harrington asks. 2 minutes to bomb release, then another 5 minutes through the worst flak to exit the target area. 7 minutes total. Harrington does the mental math. 3 minutes of fuel. 7 minutes needed. It's physically impossible. Unless he does something no RAF pilot has ever done before. Pete, he says quietly, I need you to calculate something for me. If I shut down one engine, conserve fuel, can we glide the rest of the way to friendly territory? There's a long silence from the navigator's position. Then, you want to shut down an engine while surrounded by German fighters? Can we make it on a glide? Walsh calculates frantically. From 22,000 feet at optimal glide ratio, we could maybe cover 200 miles. That puts us down somewhere in Belgium, still in German hands, but closer to Allied lines than if we run out of fuel over Berlin. Yes, maybe close enough to reach friendly territory if we're lucky. Harrington makes his decision. We stay with the bombers until they're through the worst. Then we shut down the port engine and glide west. Maybe we make it, maybe we don't, but these 84 men will make it home. You're crazy, Walsh says. Probably. Harrington agrees. But I'm crazy with a plan. The Germans are just crazy confused. Below them, Hoffman is indeed confused. The British fighter has been weaving through the bomber formation for 90 seconds now, and his window of opportunity is closing. In another minute, the bombers will release their bombs and begin evasive maneuvers, making coordinated attacks nearly impossible. He has to make a decision. Hoffman decides to gamble. All aircraft, we attack in pairs. Simultaneous assault from opposite directions. The British fighter cannot engage both pairs at once. It's sound tactics. Force the British pilot to choose which pair to defend against, leaving the other pair free to attack bombers. In the Mosquito, Walsh sees the German fighters repositioning. They're splitting again, 2 from north, 2 from south. Simultaneous approach in 20 seconds. Harrington sees the trap. He can intercept one pair but not both, and even if he shoots down both fighters in one pair, unlikely at best, the other pair will have free run at the bombers. He's out of tricks, out of fuel, out of time, and then he sees something that changes everything. The bombers are beginning their bomb run. The Lancaster formation is tightening, each bomber following the Pathfinder in front, preparing to drop their incendiaries on the target below. They're focused entirely on their bombing run, vulnerable, unable to take evasive action without ruining the bomb pattern. It's the moment the German fighters have been waiting for. Stationary targets, predictable flight paths, perfect conditions for attack. But it's also the moment when the Lancasters drop their bombs. Harrington keys his radio, breaking radio silence for the first time this mission. All bombers, this is Mosquito Escort. On my mark, execute emergency flare release. Repeat emergency flare release. Mark. It's an unorthodox command. Emergency flares are supposed to be used for signaling distress or marking positions. But Harrington isn't using them for signals. He's using them as weapons. 12 Lancasters, responding to the command, trigger their emergency flare dispensers. Each aircraft carries dozens of photo-flash bombs and flares for illuminating targets. When released together, they create a wall of brilliant white light, burning at 3,000 degrees, falling toward the Earth. The German fighters approaching from north and south fly directly into the wall of falling flares. Hoffman sees his windscreen fill with blinding white light. His radar operator screams as the burning magnesium flares pass within meters of the aircraft. Every pilot's instinct screams at him to break off, avoid collision with the falling pyrotechnics. All 4 Bf-110s break off their attack runs, scattering to avoid the flares. The Lancasters, now unburdened of bombs and flares, execute violent evasive maneuvers, diving and banking away from the target area at maximum speed. And Harrington's fuel gauge hits 0. "Port engine out," he says calmly. "Shutting down. Starboard engine has maybe 60 seconds. Then we better make them count," Walsh responds, echoing Harrington's words from earlier. The Mosquito, now flying on one engine, turns west toward home, 450 miles away across enemy territory. It's impossible. But then, so was everything they've done in the last 20 minutes. Flying a twin-engine aircraft on one engine is difficult under normal conditions. Flying it at 22,000 feet over enemy territory with the second engine about to fail is something else entirely. The Mosquito begins to descend. Without both engines providing thrust, Harrington can't maintain altitude. The aircraft drops at 500 feet per minute. A controlled descent, but inexorable. "Starboard engine failing," Harrington reports as the remaining engine begins to sputter. Switching to glide, he shuts down the starboard engine before it seizes, preserving it for one final restart if they need it. Now the Mosquito is truly gliding, a 20,000-pound glider made of wood, falling through darkness toward enemy territory. Best glide speed is 180 knots, Walsh says, reading from the emergency procedures checklist with a torch. At current rate of descent, we have approximately 40 minutes of glide time from this altitude. 40 minutes. At 180 knots, about 200 km/h, that's 133 miles of glide distance, assuming perfect conditions and no headwind. They're 450 miles from home base. "New plan," Harrington says. "We don't aim for England. We aim for the nearest Allied controlled territory. Where's the closest?" Walsh checks his charts. "American lines in eastern Belgium, about 180 miles west. If we glide perfectly, we might just reach it. Might, assuming no headwind, assuming we maintain optimal glide angle, assuming we don't get shot down by German flak or fighters on the way, assuming we find somewhere to land in darkness in potentially hostile territory. So basically assuming everything goes perfectly from here on." "Yes." Harrington almost laughs. After the last 20 minutes of chaos, the idea that anything will go perfectly is absurd, but he has no other options. "Set course for American lines," he says. "Optimal glide angle, and Pete, if we make it, first drink is on me." "When we make it," Walsh corrects. "After what you just pulled off, I refuse to believe the universe will let you die in a crashed glider over Belgium." The Mosquito glides through darkness, losing altitude steadily. 20,000 feet, 18,000 feet, 15,000 feet. Behind them, Berlin burns from the incendiaries dropped by the 12 Lancasters that Harrington saved. Ahead, the unknown, German territory, Allied lines somewhere in the darkness and a shrinking window of altitude. At 12,000 feet, Walsh spots something on his map. There's a resistance-controlled area near Bastogne, about 150 miles away. If we can reach it, then we land in friendly hands instead of German ones, Harrington finishes. "Can we make it?" Walsh does the math. "It'll be close. Very close. We'll be at maybe 500 feet when we cross into the area. One mistake, and we're in the trees." "Then we don't make mistakes," Harrington says simply. The glide continues. At 8,000 feet, they cross from Germany into Belgium. The darkness below could be friendly territory or enemy occupied. Without power, their radio is dead. They're gliding blind, trusting Walsh's navigation and hoping his calculations are correct. At 5,000 feet, German flak batteries spot them. Searchlights sweep the sky. Anti-aircraft guns fire. Not accurately, but close enough that Harrington can hear shrapnel pinging off the Mosquito's wooden fuselage. He can't take evasive action. The Mosquito is gliding at minimum speed, barely above stall. Any violent maneuver will cause the aircraft to fall out of the sky. So he glides straight through the flak, trusting in luck and the darkness. A shell explodes 50 feet away. Shrapnel tears through the starboard wing, ripping holes in the plywood skin. The Mosquito shudders but keeps gliding. 3,000 feet. Walsh is navigating by dead reckoning now, estimating their position based on time and speed. "We should be over the resistance-controlled area, but I can't confirm without radio contact." 2,000 feet. Harrington can see the ground now, or rather the absence of it, a darker darkness below them. Trees, fields, no lights anywhere. Either they're over friendly territory, or they're about to crash land in a German-occupied village. 1,000 feet. Decision time. I'm going to try to restart the starboard engine, Harrington says. One last burst of power to give us options for landing. We have no fuel, Walsh reminds him. We have fumes, maybe 30 seconds of power, enough to avoid a tree line or find a field. Harrington hits the engine restart. The Merlin coughs once, twice, then catches with a rough roar. The propeller spins. The engine delivers power, weak, sputtering, dying, but power. Harrington scans the darkness below. There, a clearing, maybe a field, maybe a meadow. He can't tell. 500 feet. The engine dies completely. Now it's pure gliding. 300 feet. He can see the clearing is a field. Plowed earth, covered in snow. 100 feet. Harrington drops the landing gear manually, hearing them lock into place. 50 feet. He pulls the nose up slightly, bleeding off speed, preparing for touchdown. The Mosquito hits the ground hard. The landing gear absorbs the first impact, then collapses. The aircraft slides on its belly across the frozen field, plowing through snow, slowing, and stops. Silence. Harrington and Walsh sit in the cockpit, breathing hard, unable to believe they're alive. We made it, Walsh says quietly. We actually made it. Yeah, Harrington responds. Now we just need to figure out if we landed with friends or enemies. As if in answer, lights appear around the field. Torches. People approaching. American voices. Anyone alive in there? They landed in Allied territory, with minutes to spare. The real climax of this story isn't the landing. It's what happened in the 20 minutes before. When military historians later analyzed Flight Lieutenant Harrington's actions over Berlin on March 24, 1944, they found something extraordinary. He broke almost every rule of fighter combat. He deliberately made himself visible to enemy fighters. He flew into a bomber formation, risking collision. He used his limited ammunition not to destroy enemies but to scatter them. He stayed in the combat zone past bingo fuel, guaranteeing he couldn't return to base. He ordered bombers to release flares in a non-standard tactical application. By every measure of conventional doctrine, he should have been killed. His tactics were unsound. His decisions were reckless. His survival was statistically impossible. And yet he saved 12 bombers and 84 lives while destroying or scattering multiple German night fighters with 0 Allied losses. The paradox is that Harrington succeeded precisely because he ignored doctrine. The Germans, professionals trained in night fighting tactics, operating under rigid ground control procedures, expected conventional responses. When Harrington gave them unconventional responses, they had no prepared counter. He turned his disadvantages into advantages. Only one aircraft against 4? Use that single aircraft to create confusion and uncertainty. Low on fuel? Use that limitation to make desperate gambles that rational pilots wouldn't attempt. Outnumbered and outgunned? Don't fight, disrupt. It's a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. When you can't win by following the rules, change the game. The German night fighter arm would later analyze the incident. Captured documents reveal Hauptmann Hoffmann filed a detailed report describing an unorthodox British intruder pilot employing deception tactics. The report recommended new training procedures for dealing with non-standard threats. In other words, Harrington's improvisation became part of German tactical evolution. One pilot's desperate creativity forced an entire air defense system to adapt. But the deeper lesson isn't tactical. It's about human decision-making under pressure. Harrington had a choice. He could have turned back at bingo fuel, following regulations, and returned safely to base. 84 men would probably have died, but he would have followed orders. No one would have blamed him. He chose differently. He chose to risk everything, his life, his navigator's life, his aircraft, his career, on the possibility that creative disruption could achieve what conventional tactics couldn't. That choice, made in seconds while flying at 300 mph through flak and darkness, is what separates competent pilots from legendary ones. Not skill, not training, not equipment. The willingness to see impossible situations and refuse to accept them as such. RAF Museum, Hendon, London, 2023. In the Fighter Command exhibit, there's a restored de Havilland Mosquito. The placard notes it's the same aircraft flown by Flight Lieutenant James Harrington on March 24, 1944, identified by the shrapnel damage still visible on the starboard wing and the belly damage from the crash landing in Belgium. Next to it is a photograph. Two young men standing beside a mosquito, grinning despite their exhaustion. Harrington and Walsh taken the day after they walked out of Belgium with resistance help and returned to British lines. The placard describes the mission briefly. Harrington's innovative defensive tactics saved 12 Lancaster bombers and their crews while disrupting German night fighter operations over Berlin. His actions earned him the Distinguished Flying Cross and set new precedents for intruder missions. What the placard doesn't mention is that Harrington completed only 2 more missions before being grounded with combat stress. The 20-minute ordeal over Berlin, flying on empty tanks while making split-second decisions that determined who lived and died, broke something in him. He was 24 years old. He survived the war, became a flight instructor, taught hundreds of pilots, and died in 1987 at age 67. His obituary in the Times mentioned his DFC but not the specific mission that earned it. Peter Walsh, his navigator, became an engineer and helped design radar systems for civilian aviation. He never flew in combat again after that night. When asked about the mission in a 1982 interview, he said simply, "Jimmy saved 84 men by refusing to believe we couldn't do the impossible. That's all you need to know about him." The 12 Lancaster crews that Harrington saved completed their mission. All 12 bombers returned to base. Of the 84 men, 79 survived the war. They went home to families, had children, built lives. They exist because one pilot, faced with impossible mathematics, decided that creativity mattered more than fuel calculations. The mosquito in the museum is a testament not to technology or firepower, but to something more fundamental: human ingenuity under pressure, the ability to see problems differently, to find solutions where others see only constraints. Hauptmann Hoffmann was right in his report. Harrington was unorthodox, but sometimes unorthodox is exactly what saves lives.